All right, let's get today underway. So today is one of our ID masterclasses, which is where we dive a little deeper into the topic of the month, which this month is the future of leadership. We had the benefit of the interview I did a couple of weeks ago with Fran Katsoudas, which I've had a lot of positive feedback on. It was just really well received, and it was so good to hear. I mean, even for me to hear what is her perspective from her vantage point on how she sees the future of leadership was really cool. So, and I've been back and listened to that whole recording again, you know, and heard things for the first time, which I find interesting, even though I was well and truly in it, you know. So we'll talk about that a little bit, but as we always do, I mean, at the end of the day, and you heard Fran say this, it's all about being in stride and being at our best. So our model for doing that is our peak performance indicator. So let's start with that and just go around the room and just hear, or we can put a poll up and see, if you just put in the chat what everyone's number is, and then we can, you know, take a few minutes to talk to those numbers if someone has something they want to either share or ask from the group. So let's just put them in the chat. That's great, Grant. It's good to see you back up there again, because you've been there and then you're sort of down for a little bit and then back again. So that's really great. Okay, does anyone want to talk to their number? Any stories or any questions? Particularly if there's been a shift.
I can share. This is John. I guess you can see that.
Yep.
I'm still doing pretty well. I had a little dip for a week or so. And then, and that had to do mostly with trying to get certain agenda across, and I wasn't making progress with the team. I started looking at, made a team or a group ID, and it became clear what I needed to do. And so that really charged me up. And then I listened to the advice you gave me one time, which is basically keep busy. For my ID, your advice is whenever you take a dip, just keep busy, which that rang true in my head. And I looked at all the indicators that I needed to follow, and that worked really well for me. So everybody's in line, understands what I'm trying to do, and it brought me back up.
That's awesome, John. Well done. I mean, I think I love, as I listen to you, what's really nice is instead of wallowing in it and being a victim, you know, knowing that your idea allowed you to sort of go, okay, here's where I'm at, but what can I do about it? And you had, you know, the resourcefulness to sort of look for your ID, get some ideas from it, and get yourself back into a better place. Well done.
Thank you for the advice. That really rang in my head. Honestly, it was your advice. You gave that to me at one time.
Yeah. And isn't it, well, thank you. And isn't it interesting how sometimes it's just a simple phrase like keep busy, you know, and people can hold on just one word, one phrase, and that can be enough to just get you started. It's not the totality of it, but it just gets you started back into a good place again.
Yeah, I'm super excited. I'm gonna go off video because I'm taking the time to eat here because I'm super busy, and this is a good time to do both.
All good. David, what about for you? Because you know, we haven't seen you for a while, and then you're back, and it's great to see your face again. But 7, from memory, 7's a lower score for you. So I just wondered how are you, and what's the story behind your number?
Yeah, 7 is a very low number for me. I'm normally at a 9 or a low 9 or maybe a high 8. It's really bad. I'm just tired.
Okay.
I'm actually just simply exhausted, and I'm not quite sure. I'm way too excited about stuff. I just don't seem to be able to. I wake up tired in the mornings, and so I hummed and hard when I put 7 in there, and I thought, no, I'm actually going to put 7 in there just because it's hard to, it's just hard to have that energy when I'm as tired as what I am. And I think all I need, I'm not quite sure. I think I need I don't know that I need another holiday on top of all the COVID holidays that we've had. But I somehow I just need to get more sleep, or get some of the projects off my plate and completed, or something like that. So, yeah, I thought you'd pick up on me being a 7.
Yeah.
So very, very, very unusual. Yeah, thanks, Greg.
Well, you're part of a group that, you know, this group is here because they care about being at their best. And I think all of us know that that really starts from like an 8 and above. And so whilst for many other people, 7 probably is acceptable to them and gets them through life, I know for most of us, you know, that's almost like the floor as opposed to the ceiling, you know. And I know you care about that. So fatigue is an interesting one, or that feeling of, you know, lethargy and fatigue, because it can come from a variety of sources. It can be everything from a lack of rest, you know, nutrition, and not even lack of, but the quality of the rest that you have. And then there's nutrition, and then there's exercise, and then there's, of course, whether you're in stride or not, you know. And but you know your ID very well. I mean, you've known of it for years, so I'm sure you have a good sense of what you might need to do there. So just, I'd say, play around and experiment with a few things, which is very true with your ID. And if in a couple of weeks you haven't found a change in that, you know, let's explore a little bit more for you and see what else. It might be just a nuance that you need to address to get, you know, back to that higher number.
And I actually thought that a trip to the pharmacy might be my best option.
Oh, really?
Yeah, just to get a good night's sleep, just
right.
1 or 2 good nights sleep, and I think I might be. So to put that into context, yeah, just to get 1 or 2 good nights sleep, then I think my tanks would be full to overflowing all over again.
Wow, that's really cool.
When you say pharmacy, do you mean pub?
A pub's only got 3 letters in it, Greg.
All right. Anyone else got anything they'd like to share? All right. Well, let's move on and get into the meat of our day. So first of all, is there anything on people's minds that they want, you know, questions that they've got, if we think of it like problems that are on your mind, or opportunities you want to explore, insights that you heard from Fran's discussion a couple of weeks ago that you want to delve into a little bit more? I haven't actually had anyone send me any questions ahead of time, so I wanted to just quickly take stock and say, is there anything that's on your minds that you would like to make sure we cover today?
I've got one to throw out because it's this group. The idea of 2 5s in an ID, the impact that has on the other drives, and how we might look differently at those 2 drives, because I think they're ramped, and I think that that can also, there's 2 parts, that those other drives are stronger and they show up therefore some way, and then there's blind spots with those 5s they don't really get, because they don't have that drive one way or the other. And I think that with 2 5s or something, there can be some blind spots, and that person can be very black and white for seeing the other people are seeing color, something like that.
Okay, that's good, Greg. That's really good. Thank you. Jose, I think you're going to ask something.
Yes. What I was going to throw in, I think it might be too big, is how, even though we're keyed in and we've got the ID and we're thinking in those sort of lines, the difficulty I find is that when you're in a tribe, whether it be this work group, that work group, this team, how do we best manage the fact that they're not keyed into the being in stride? And I walk into a meeting and I can see 2 or 3 of them are in stride. They're good. They've got these other 3 people. They're not aware that they're not in stride. We're not having that conversation about what can we do to help you to get in stride. And it's a culture thing. It's the, how do you manage that tribal culture of that group when they're not aware of what's going on, without lapsing into the language that that's going to chew up a lot of time because they're not into it, and potentially it's going to alienate them because they don't want to hear it, kind of thing. I don't know if I'm expressing that very well. It's just yesterday I had that sort of experience where I was riding the wave of, you know, Jose's in the room, you've got to do things his way, but I get to do that because I've got seniority. So I get to help with the whole, so what's going on in your life? And he starts telling me about work, and I go, not interested in that. Tell me about you. We can get to work later. That sort of thing. It's easier for me because I've got that seniority, but maybe not that easy when I'm in a space where I don't have that seniority, and it's tricky to navigate those. That perception that because the manager's the manager and they're getting paid X, they get to dictate the space, and they don't realize the damage they're doing by dictating that approach. If you know what I mean, I don't know if I'm expressing very well.
No, I think you've done a good job. So let's have a look at that a little later. That's good. Thanks, Jose. Anyone else? Any questions or anything you want to unpack from the future of leadership from that discussion that Fran had with us there a couple of weeks back? Is there anything that's hanging over for anyone that they would like to explore there? I will tell you that having gone back and listened to it, and I made a whole bunch of notes, you know, I found myself probably about every 5 minutes by taking notes and sort of seeing that there was like vignettes that we could just sort of grab and put little edits, you know, like grab that package and put it out on social or, you know, on a site somewhere. There's so many really top quality remarks that she made. When you stop and have, back then I was sort of in the middle of the interview of doing it, but when you have the chance to be able to stop and pause and really absorb what she's sharing, it was really impactful, and not just about the future of leadership. It was almost about hearing from a leader who's, you know, who knows what it's like to be in stride and to have lived a leadership journey that way. It was really quite powerful. So I'd really commend to all of you, if you haven't done so, even if you sat through the interview, at some point, jump onto our YouTube channel. You can see it on the Instinctive Drives YouTube channel. You can just grab that video and watch it at any time, and I'd really commend it to you. Even if you don't have a whole hour and you only had 20 minutes each time, 15 minutes each time, you would still get a lot from it. It was really interesting for me to go back over it again. So I'd commend that to you. All right, one of the things that came out of that for me that I thought might be worth exploring in light of where we're going with this concept of looking at the whole person is the notion of personal boundaries and what personal boundaries mean for different IDs. So I might add that into the other two questions that have been raised already for today, and let's get to work. Unless everyone's okay with that, nothing else. So Greg, let's start with the topic or the question you just raised about the impact of the other drives on fives, or let's just call it fives. We'll talk about, you know, when you've got is it 2 5s, Greg, or just 1 5?
I'm noticing with 2. What prompted this was a client on Tuesday or so this week, where she's a 7-3-5-5, and her concern was that she's got all this great stuff to offer the team, but she's kind of across the team. She's like executive assistant, almost moving into HR. So she sits in with one of the managers who lets her make her comments and makes her observations. I think it's the 3 she's proud of in that regard, not her concept, not her verify comments, but the fact she's picking up stuff. And this one likes a lot. The other ones aren't doing it. And another time we were asked to actually work with this lady and another lady because they weren't going on real well. And the second lady said, no, I'm good, we're okay. And so anyway, she's bemoaning the fact that they don't want to take her gift and that she doesn't feel appreciated. And as she was telling her moan story, I sort of went, yeah, you're annoying in my head, you know, like because you're telling me what's wrong with me as opposed to helping me find more of what I want to find, right? And I found a way of sort of saying how would you hear you and that sort of thing. And I at one point just sort of did this with my hands. I said, imagine going in with a really lower breathing rate and a really calmer thing where they're going, wow, why are you so focused? What's going on with you? And they were attracted to your comment. And it was so cut and dry with this sense of harmony for the pickup or any risk involved. And it was like, I thought, okay, there's other things going on. But then I started thinking of other fives. And you know, the classic 7-5-5-3, you know, where there's that two middle ones or 8-8-5-5-2s. And so I'm just asking people if their experience has been where they seem like those other ones, like a 7-5-5-3 becomes an 8-5-5-2, right? That sort of thing. And this lady just made that come in stark contrast to there was no verifying going on in her. She wasn't checking in with him. She wasn't verifying what she said made any difference. There was no, look, it was another classic of all her attention was on herself as well, you know. So that's what prompted it. And we finished that very well, but it just made me start to think.
So can I maybe just to break it down, the first question I would ask is, firstly, we don't have anyone on this call, I don't think, who's got 2 5s. Otherwise, that would be great to be able to ask.
Yeah.
But, has anyone had any experience where someone with 2 5s has the effect of exacerbating the other drives? You know, where to your point, a 7-5-5-3 might come across as an even stronger verifier than a 7, or even a stronger avoid improvise than a 3. Has anyone had that experience? I can't say I've had it stand out, but then I haven't, it just hasn't stood out to me. I haven't had that reaction from people, you know, whereas when I first came across the 70, like when we talk about someone being a 70 in a drive, it was because when we talked to, you know, someone who was like, say, Grant, your ID 7454, I had like very often people would say, oh my God, if I'm a 7, he must be like a 70 because he's way more intense than me, you know? And I had that a lot. And I thought, okay, there must be something in that. But I would say I haven't had that type of reaction to the 2 5s. But what I have had is these sorts of questions. And I do feel like there's maybe something about the 5s that we haven't yet fully understood. I think that's what I would say. There's some unfinished discovery about the 5s. But we've got to be careful because we don't just want everyone's opinions on it. We want, you know, whatever we would uncover, we've got to be able to test and see, yes, that's true 100% of the time for 2 5s or 1 5. But I do, my gut is that there's some unfinished exploration for the 5s.
I think it'd just be lovely if everyone just started watching it, because I don't think the people who have their IDs themselves are going to pick it up. You want to be working with them a lot and going, oh, that's interesting. You need a lot of comparison. But the other one that's more obvious to me is the blind spots the 5 will have for the other drives. That when you're coaching them, that you got to remind them, no, you won't get it. Like you won't get why they're so worried about this. You know, it's like they're not making it up. It really is intense, and they just go, yeah, well, we're just this. And usually that comment comes from a 5 in that drive. Like they just has no charge.
So those of you with 5s, what does the 5 mean for you? Like we often describe it as there's no drive, you know, but do you find that it causes you to not relate to that drive, or do you find that you actually do relate or have some level of empathy? What's your experience of yourself with the 5 compared to your other drives?
Can I comment on that? And I think, Greg, what you were mentioning, some of the angst, I find a lot of angst around my 5 incomplete. So even though I sometimes see the advantage that I take different approaches, I never really feel happy with what I do. So it's almost like with some of the other drives, I can, you know, I know, you know, what I'm doing with that, and I feel happy that, you know, I've made the choice to do that. When I'm with complete, I almost second guess myself no matter what I do. So I never really feel happy because I just don't feel, I don't know, secure in that space, maybe.
Either up or down?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so in one sense, you know, if I'm having a discussion with someone, you know, if you want to take it to the strengths place, then yeah, you can engage me on all the other drives. But, you know, if someone is very, well, then, you know, verify. If you're looking for the gaps, okay, well, that's the, you know, that's where there'll be a whole lot of attention, because that's where, you know, I don't know, I'm not happy, I'm, you know, whatever. So it'll command a lot of attention potentially.
Thanks, Leonie. What about others? Grant, when I saw you nodding before when Leonie was talking, how do you feel that your 5 incomplete, given that it's the same drive that you have the 5 in? How does you?
I think, with all the due respect, I think I just dismissed it so quickly in a sense of like, yeah, they'll be done soon. You know, like I know there's something in there, but what's it going to do? I always go straight to the 8 and go, yeah, and then, you know, like so I find that the 5 is, to me, it's the guy in the volleyball game that sets the ball up. I'm waiting for the spike, you know, and that's, to be really, you know, cruelly honest. It's like I go, I don't value it, and the down verifies. I kind of go, they're there, you know, like I don't know what to say to them. It's like, I get that they don't. It's this. It just is what it is, and I love that, because I think I might be not actually a 5 in that score. I think I might be a 4.9 or a 4.8, you know, like, because I go, yeah, and that really helps with the other one. Like I go, come on, let's get to it. But then is that my 8 and 2 talking like, come on, let's get to it? So, but I feel the thing that I'm working on, and I do it well at work, but I don't do it well at home with the other. There's a few verifies in the family. I don't really, I think I say get it's one word. I don't think I really respect it and all the gifts it brings. I think that's, I hate to admit that out loud, but I don't think I really respect it. Yeah. And I want to. I mean, I do, but I don't think I show it.
So let's before we sort of solve for it, let's just hear some perspectives from other people on how you see your 5s.
I
Greg,
find. Oh,
sorry, go for it. I'll go after you.
no, you're there.
Go, Grant.
Yeah, I don't know if it's coincidental or not, but I literally had no connection to my 5 when I first did ID. I couldn't even remember what the complete drive was. I could tell you what the other 3 drives were, but complete drive just wasn't even on my radar. It wasn't until I started doing the masterclasses that I actually learned what the complete drive was all about. It just was bizarre. It was like a literal disconnection. I study it, I learn it, I look at it, you know, when it comes to looking at a person's drive, if someone's an up or a down complete. The question I've got around the 5 is, do you have the ability to flex within the drive, being a 5?
And Grant, can I just ask you before we go there, as you learnt more about the complete drive, did you get any more connection with it, or you still stayed as disconnected?
No, it resonated. It went from complete unknown to known but no connection, known but yeah, just, I don't know. I don't lose sleep over it. That's for sure.
I wonder if that's what others experience who are 5s as well. Leonie, would you say that's what you feel for the 5, or is it different for you?
Yes, yeah, I think there's as I've got to know it better, it's more on the radar. But yes, I think what comes into play for me is perhaps my high, you know, verify, being self-critical about how I deal with complete is probably what shows up. Yeah. So to some degree, it is. I do want to value it, and in some ways, you're right. I don't. And perhaps I understand both. You know, both sides to a degree, but just not in the same way, just not with the same depth of feeling or whatever. It's a maybe it's a theoretical knowledge versus more of a personal knowledge.
Okay. And Jim, you were going to share something before.
Yes, I see a 5 and authenticate as freedom. In other words, I'm not held down to a score when it comes to authenticate. So while I like to be personally involved in the house I live in, which is 15, 16 rooms, I built it with my own hands. But also I like to enjoy multiple outcomes and the freedom to understand a concept behind something and be not directly involved. So yeah, I see a 5 to me as freedom to be able to move up and down across the instinctive behavior.
I reckon, Jim, with your one incomplete, you see everything as a factor of freedom.
Now, I wanted you to leave that one alone.
I like you already, even though you're not a 5. You're a green up. You're an honorary green up.
So the question then Grant asked was, you know, can we flex? Does a 5 actually allow you to go either way? You know, and is that your experience that, like Jim just said, there's times when he feels that he's been up on that drive, like as an authenticator being hands-on. There's other times when he wants to delve into the conceptual world and can feel himself being an avoid or doing the avoid authenticate behaviors, even if it's coming from a different place. And I guess I'd add doing those behaviors without being de-energized by them or energized. It's just doing them, you know. How is that for you guys who are 5s?
I'll take the conversation to another level, and that is everything we do creates emotional molecules. So as a 5 and authenticator, I don't get angry, I don't get joy, I've just got the freedom to move up and down without attracting any internal chemical or emotional reaction to what I'm doing, which is what I mean by freedom.
Yep. Yeah. So I use a different word in terms of, but well, you use the concept of energy. So that's the point. If you have a drive and you're filling that drive, then you're energizing yourself, or equally, you know, getting de-energized by it if it's pulling you out of stride. And what you're saying is you don't have any energy connection that occurs for you in that 5.
Yeah, total freedom.
Okay. And do you think, Jim, it exacerbates other drives? Do you think, and as I said, we don't have anyone who's a double 5, but do you see other drives being more intense because of, I mean, given you a very intense ID anyway, but do you see any effect on the others because of that 5?
Not really, but as Greg was saying, I like to get started quickly and multiple outcomes, so one becomes the other. You know, it's given me permission and the freedom to use my authenticator at a seek multiple outcomes and then cross over into the one and follow through and rattle around down there. But no, I just see it as a freedom thing. And you call it energy. I just know all interactions at a human level create emotional molecules. It can be adrenaline, it can be endomorphine through pleasure. But when you've got a 5, you don't get those reactions, so that you've got more freedom to think and play in that area, stay in that area.
Yeah. Steve, what about you as a 5? What does a 5 mean for you?
Morning, Paul. Yeah, I've been learnt to become very pragmatic over sort of the last sort of 10 or 15 years in working career. So therefore I bounce, and I think bouncing off Jim's comment about the energy and the emotional lack, well, there's no huge emotional impact from that drive. So I find I utilize either side of the authenticate to suit the situation. And reflecting and listening to everybody, I find when I bump into someone who is more extreme in that drive, that I pick it up and notice it more and have to deal with, oh, hang on, why are they so extreme in that particular drive? Like I'm looking at the keywords graph you shared with us, and at the top there, a clear picture. I enjoy a clear picture and having strategy and vision. but I'm very happy to understand people's feelings and why are they sort of, why has that event created a huge emotional turmoil for them? But when you find someone is sitting in that area of being feeling they're gloomy and they're cheesed off and they can't get out of it, it's sort of it really sort of it stands out for me. Go, well, why are you so extreme in that particular drive? So I'm pragmatic, but I notice people when they become more extreme in that particular drive.
So as an alternative though, do you notice the same with someone who's an avoid complete, for example, or a strong improviser? Do you have the same because they're actually opposite to you? Do you find yourself having a similar reaction, or do you find yourself actually more accepting of that oppositeness?
Yes, you become more accepting because I'm higher in the complete, and but I've also learned I'm low in the improvise, and I've understood that I need to increase or go on the other side of the improvise drive, because you just become too hemmed in. So this is where becoming very pragmatic, understanding my preference is to not improvise, but that doesn't suit what I need to do. So therefore I need to become uncomfortable and deal with it and grow capacity to handle that. So the same thing when someone's at the other extreme, I notice it, but I understand, well, I'm a high completer. I want to get the job done. I want to get it resolved to move on. That's not their particular drive. So how do I help them to come along on the journey? So becoming aware of where I'm at, but understanding, well, they're opposite. So therefore, okay, how do we approach it differently? And when Jose was mentioning before about his situation of the word that came to mind, I think Fran mentioned it last week about servant leadership.
Yeah.
And servant leadership is having discussion, is actually using language and words that associate with my team and being at their level and inspiring them to move. So bringing a couple of those concepts together, accepting people who have different drives and working with them.
Thanks, Steve. And so what about this idea of being the glue in a drive? Because one of the comments I've heard people talk about being a 5 is they find that they're like the mediator for that drive because they can like see both sides. And if you've got, for example, if you're a 5 incomplete, and you've got people who are completers not seeing eye to eye with the void completes, or, you know, there's some sort of friction there, the 5 is that facilitator that can find the right words and, you know, mediation to bring it together, whether it's complete or any of the other three other drives. Does that resonate for you, or is that not how you see your drive or your experience of your own drive?
That might just be because I was typing it. I can't be bothered to type. They don't have a dog in the race. You know, like there's no emotional connection there, so they can. It's like when someone else comes and tells you about their financial problems, you can be really clever, but when it's yours, it's moan groan time. And I think that having the 5 means, oh, really? Oh, that's interesting. You can stay neutral longer, and then they're hear more, and therefore give some feedback that they can't hear because our drives blind us as well as enhance us. You know, so that's my. Thanks,
Greg. So that's a good segue to the second part of what you asked, which is the blind spots of being a 5. That's an interesting dimension. You know, do you guys see yourselves as having blind spots because of your 5s? Do you feel that they're just like, I know for me with my stronger drive, all my drives are strong, but, you know, I can see that there are blind spots that I, in some cases, feel like I carry a burden through life with some of the intensities that, you know, like for me as the one in Authenticate, I think everything's obvious. And even when I've been explicit, it's still not obvious. So, you know, I just get that's and it's a blind spot, and that's just always there. Do you see blind spots associated with your 5? Or have you experienced that?
Could I draw an analogy? I see a seeking, you know, a 6, 7, 8, 9 or a 1, 2, 3, 4 is like a pole of a magnet, and a 5 to me is like a non-magnetized piece of steel. So in other words, when two high verifiers come together, the two north poles or two south poles pushing against each other. When it's a resistant, when it's avoiding, then as north-south, they attract to each other or they can work together. But a 5 to me is like a piece of steel. There's no magnetic bias. So it can talk to, but I can see what you mean. It would be blind to a north pole or a south pole because it can't, you know, provide the other force from it, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Can I make an observation?
Okay.
I work with engineers all day long, and I had an engineer who kept providing comments about how to approach a problem, and he kept going on and on with different approaches and such. And then the next time we met, you know, he wanted a lot more structure. He wanted, we need a single approach. And then the next time we met, it was completely different. So I looked up his ID. He had a 5 at complete, and I'm like, is that what that means? He's just going back and forth on me. I looked at my other engineers, and there was no 5s anywhere. So I was scratching my head, wondering if that's the problem that I'm dealing with.
Well, maybe. I mean, that's a good example of it, John. Thank you. I can't say I've had in my experience with ID any consistent comment about blind spots even with OneDrive that I could then extrapolate out to the others, you know. And that's not to say there aren't any. Just like I had a lot of learnings last year as we got deeper into each drive, you know, that came out from these webinars. And I just have this feeling that there's more to understand about the 5s. And to Greg's initial comment, even double 5s. You know, if someone's got 2 5s as opposed to 1, it might open up another world of, you know, of either confusion or opportunity that we don't yet understand. We don't have anyone here to explore that with, but it's really fun to listen. Well, a lot of what you're sharing sort of validates the fact that there's no drive. And I mean, when you say not just you don't have any drive there, you don't connect with it, you don't get energized or de-energized from it. It is like it doesn't exist for you. You know, if we could do your ID and just show the 3 drives that drive you, it's probably fine, you know. It doesn't really resonate.
Maybe this is a great group to just send this out there. Let's just all keep our radar out and look for when we see something like what you were doing, John. You're going, that's interesting. You know, like you're just picking up stuff. Because I suspect that because we don't have any energy for it, we're going to miss some of the nuance or importance that other people have when they have that drive. And again, my sad but honest admission is I could dismiss it easier because I don't have any charge for it, you know, and I don't want to do that. You know?
All right, maybe it's a good chance now to segue then to the next question we had, yours, Jose. I'm just conscious of the time as well. You talked about, you know, your situation, just for those who are new to the call. Maybe just for time, what I heard you say was it's all very well for you to be into being your best self and, you know, the concept of living in stride. But when you're working or living in an environment with others that don't care about that so much, what's a sensible way to really navigate that, you know, so that you don't irritate others, but you also don't get pulled out of stride and lower your own game or standards yourself? Is that the essence of your question, or have I missed it? Yeah. Okay, great. So I don't know whether anyone on the call has had that experience and has a suggestion for how you might then, you know, for yourself, but sharing it back with Jose, how would you recommend you be true to yourself in a situation like that, and maybe in a way that inspires others rather than irritates them from what you do? Are there any tips and techniques you've learned? And there you go. All right, let's move on to the next question. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Well, if I may, I think this is the fundamental conflict of humans. This is the base. This is the bottom line. Me being true to me and me fitting in is a continuous challenge through all our lives from the moment before we're born. You know, we have a certain biochemical makeup. Our mother's got something else flowing through her blood, and all of a sudden that hormone does this to that particular organ, and boom, you know, whoa. And I think it just keeps on going, you know, and so the dance for me that ID is put a real spring into my step, is that it reminds me that I have to look after me maybe first, like the airlines say, put your own oxygen mask on first, just so I can breathe. But that's only half the formula. The other half is what do they need so they can breathe. And it's the dance between fitting in, being true, fitting in, and it's a curvy line. It's not a straight line, you know. And I think if people think of the times they've had most of their troubles, the conflict was one of two things: is I was either not being real with me or being help good me, or I wasn't fitting in. I felt totally lost, left out. And when they both happen together, you get a very low PPI score.
I have a different view of that. Usually when people, usually when I encounter people that haven't done their drive, they're asking me, why should I do it? And my basic answer is, because I want you to operate at your best. And in return, I expect you to help me operate at my best. And that's how we interoperate to do the best that we can when we're together. Sometimes that works, sometimes that doesn't.
You know, as I listen to you, I think it's firstly, I think it's a very real scenario, Jose, you know, and to Greg's point, maybe it's the conundrum of life. But what I would wonder is, are you really irritating them? You know, sometimes when you irritate, what looks like an irritation is actually people squirming in their own stuff, and they actually need you to sort of irritate the sore so that they're inspired to do something about it. And what I would fall back on is maybe a way for you to check yourself and be sort of insulated from it is, if you're being authentic and you're being vulnerable and you're in your best place, the only effect you're having on them is one of positivity. It can't be anything else, but that doesn't mean it looks like positivity. You know, like the first step to them actually, to get into a better place is maybe realizing and you know, making the badness of it look worse than what it is, so they're inspired to do something about it. Like they may have got to really get to a squirming place first that looks like you're irritating them. They're actually irritating themselves because they want what you're having. And then they get to a place where they go, you know what, damn it, I'm sick of talking about it. I'm going to do something about it. You know, either one way is to tell John to rack off, you know, he's irritating me, but really it's not John, it's me irritating myself. And then they might be inspired to do something. So I would just check if, as long as it's not about your ego and your control, to your point about being the boss and so on. If you're in a place of real authenticity, vulnerability, and you are on your game, trust that the vibration you're giving out is only one of positivity and being constructive and loving, and it will make a difference. But it won't always start or look like that because they're in a different place to you.
I've got an image from all of this information. I've turned it into a simile. I hope or metaphor. I hope you don't mind. It's like we're each of us anchovies swimming in a school. And some of us think, well, you know, to be at our best, we need to swim in this direction. And that means bumping into some and sort of trying to change their course and saying, I'm going this way. And sometimes it means sort of swimming away from the school and being in that sort of empty space by yourself. And when you find yourself there, you have to duck back into the school because, you know, you've got to be in the school or you get eaten. But you're still sort of, but I'm still going this way because this is still what we all need. This is still, I trust, I know I'm doing the right thing. Come on, guys, come with me. And I think if you do that often enough, eventually the others, as you said, the school will change direction and go and go the way you are. And it comes down to that level of believe in yourself because you know it's right because it's working. And the fact that it's working is more than enough evidence for, 7-7.
What I would check yourself on is just, identifying what it is that you're really vulnerable to with your ID. Like what's your blind spot and what's your, like we all have a nemesis with our ID, something that no matter how well we understand it, it still keeps biting us. So for example, one of mine is the thing about being obvious, and as I say, even when I thought I'd been explicit, there are people that still say, but you haven't told us everything. I'm like, really? What did I miss? And I can see where I've given them steps 1, 5, well, what to me were 1, 2, 3, and 4. For them were 1, 5, 13, and 21, and there's still so much more detail in between that I didn't even realize was missing. That blind spot is just a part of my life. So I understand it. But even the understanding of it doesn't mean I can see 2, 3, and 4 every time. Like, that's just always there. And I'd encourage you to think, what is that for me? And the more intense each of our IDs are, like I look at mine and say Jim's is an equally really intense ID. Judy's is a very intense ID. Greg's is an intense ID. We would all have our own words for what is that. And I've got more than one, by the way. What are those 2 or 3 things that, no matter how much we understand them, they were always there because they can be biting you. Like, even though you might be coming from a really good place, I can see with your ID, there could be certain things that you do, just you being you, that might be irritating people, and it's not about whether know their ID or not. It's just you being who you are. They could understand ID and you still irritate them. So I think it's good to understand that. And one of the things that comes up for me is, particularly when you're in a position of authority and seniority, is maybe they're experiencing you telling a lot instead of asking questions of them and inviting them in, and one of the things we got from the Future of Leadership 2 weeks ago was the whole notion of inclusivity, of people being accepted more completely for who they are, whether they're black or white or certain, whatever the various orientations might be. But that also includes with their different views, that they're still as accepted and so on. And that's really tough for someone with your ID because you're much more black and white, and so maybe they struggle with that. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there, but it might give you something to hook onto and sort of go, well, maybe I need to even talk with them about how I show up and how my leadership style affects them. That might be a great, healthy discussion that invites them in and opens up a better connection between you and them.
I actually cheat, to be honest with you, because I make it my mission to do the checking in, and I use this as the tool to solve the problem. That it's not about the project or the whatever it is that I'd be telling them what to. Instead, I just focus on how can I best engage with you. I'll focus on that, and then they end up doing the thing anyway. So that's my. I realize I come across as an arrogant a-hole. I get it. So I make it my mission to not come across like that by not focusing on the thing that would make me that. So I sort of use my ID to solve that problem, kind of thing. So it to me, that's almost like cheating. It's like knowing what the test is about, and so going off and writing down all the answers before I go into the test. So naughty of me.
Okay. Anyone else have any other perspectives on that, or even questions it's raised for yourself? If you had a similar situation to Jose that you wanted to either ask or share?
Can I just add in? I think there's some similarities here, but having a curious mindset is really helpful for me. So noticing with curiosity. Now that comes with me as a coach. That's part of what I'm sort of trained to do. But yes, trying to hold off the judgment trying to notice more, trying to be curious about it. And yes, even though I say to people, I have more of a theoretical empathy than a practical empathy. I can be really, really empathetic, but I'm very theoretical about it. So whereas I know, a lot of other people they just can't help but be empathetic. I can be it, but I tell you what, I work to be that. Very intentional.
I remember when we covered this some meetings ago, Leonie, and this whole concept of empathy, because it's one of those qualities in life that every human being wants. Well, I shouldn't say every, most human beings want to, see themselves as being empathetic, and yet there is a definite distinction on the verified drive around how people show up with empathy. And so the delineation was that there's emotional empathy and there's like cognitive empathy, intellectual empathy. And so the verifiers were more the intellectual, if you like, the head. The avoid verifies the heart, the emotional empathy. And whilst I think that's true, that doesn't land so well with a whole bunch of verifiers, and I will say there are a bunch of avoid verifiers that don't want to be seen as soft or, just always emotional, even though they just resonate so strongly at an emotional level, like truly feel the feelings of the person that they're talking about. Whereas people like you and I as verifiers, we can relate, we can cognitively relate. Even when I've just spoke to someone yesterday who just lost a parent and now has no parents, and I was relating to how that, I said, well, I'm in the same situation. But I was even hearing myself say it, thinking, I get it. Like I can relate intellectually, but I wasn't actually having the feelings that I'm sure he's feeling right now, even though I felt bad for him, but I didn't really feel bad. I think if I could say what I was thinking bad for him, and understanding what he was going through, but not necessarily, my energy didn't change to be one of his at that time. And that's the difference to me between the empathy of the avoid verifier versus the verifier.
But Paul, we often say that the down authenticate gets on the wavelength of people and really connects and sees the. So how does that work? That you don't feel his pain in that we go around saying, oh, you get me. Is that a theoretical getting? That's an interesting conundrum for me.
Yeah, it is. And thanks for asking the tough question. There is a difference. I'm trying to think of how to. So if I'm watching a movie, I can be really emotional. Like I won't watch a horror movie. I just will not watch. I will walk out or not. I just will not watch anything that's got any type of fear in it like that. For me, I just won't do that to myself because it's so. Maybe that's why, because it really affects me. But if it's a romantic movie or something with, some level of feeling, like an inspirational movie, oh my God, I get so affected at an emotional level, like in myself, because I guess I'm relating to what I'm seeing. But is there a difference between relating and feeling? I don't know. I haven't thought about it so much, but I will think about that now, Greg, to see what the distinction is. Yeah.
Well, what I say with my avoid authenticate, the way I empathize is I usually try to, when someone tells me something, I'll sort of throw out a situation like that. So, it's like this, and I'll give an example of how I'm feeling, like when I felt like that, but it's not the same. And that's
it. That's it. That's exactly it. Thanks, Ian. Because when I'm watching a movie like that, I'm imagining, oh my God, if that was me, I'd be feeling, it's all about me. I'd be feeling this. I'm not feeling their feelings. I'm imagining that their feelings are the same as my feelings, but I'm not actually feeling their feeling. Whereas I watch other people who are avoid verifiers, and it's almost like they jumped into that person's body and were feeling the same feelings of that person. And they don't even want to. They don't, it's like they don't have any control over it. And I've had people say, please, I can't put myself in that situation because I know I'm going to get affected and I don't have control. I wish I had more control over that, but I don't. which I find very powerful. Yeah, that's exactly right, Ian. I mean, it almost sounds selfish to hear it, but it's not that's not the intention, but you're relating because of how you see it yourself, not because of you actually feeling whatever that person is feeling.
But it can then be perceived that you're being selfish, just so you know as well, because people go, well, it's not all about you.
Mm.
You go, oh, I thought I was being empathetic. But,
so in our, I would love to explore with this particular class, not today because we won't have the time for it, but just lined up this notion of what is the nemesis vulnerability of each of your drives, you know, and not based on the theory of, well, verifiers are like this and authenticators like that, but even as a whole ID, when you think about, for all that you've learned about your ID, what are the things that, for all the awareness, still bites me? I mean, it's because that's instinct, right? It's just there instinctively. I even had that thought when you were talking about the fives, was that at least with the five, you can, maybe it's our conscious, not drive, but you can consciously go up and down. Whereas when it's instinctive, it's just like, it's there, whether you like it or not, whether you know it or not, it just happens. And I wonder what that is at a vulnerability level or a blind spot level type thing for each of us, that for all we know it still gets to us. And I think it could be really validating and really helpful to others on the call to hear from a peer here, to sort of go, me too, you know, like I have that too. And then it makes you feel like, okay, so it's not like a disease that you have that, you know, is unique to you. It's something that comes with the territory, and, you know, it's just good to know that's what it is. It's not because of anything else being wrong. It's just part of who you are. It'll always be there, but even just sharing that with others helps. But I think it'd be a really powerful conversation to unpack that and see, you know, what we each are experiencing, because there's great self-awareness on the people on this call. And yet I know in all of that, there'd still be things that we're wrestling with as our individual nemesis, you know. And for me, I can see particularly some in the verify drive, and some one or two with the avoid authenticate. And it's you know, and they're obviously my most intense drives, but I'd love to hear what others find. And it could well be that some of the things I'm wrestling with as a verify, someone else says as a strong verify, no, that's not true for me. So maybe it's not linked to my ID, maybe it's from some other, you know, angle, but it would be interesting to hear that. So that's one that we can talk about. And the other one was on personal boundaries, because there is now, if we just follow through on that future of leadership, and Fran was making the comment about it's the whole person. You know, there was a time when as a manager or a person, you didn't talk about what was going on in their personal life, whereas now it's a blurred line between personal and business life. And although it's blurred on the one hand, people still have their boundaries. And I wonder whether boundaries are different depending on our IDs, and things that I might feel totally fine to talk about and doesn't worry me at all, and feel very open and vulnerable. That might come from either strong self-awareness and security, or it might be my ID. Someone else could be freaking out that we're having that conversation, and you're being so open, and you're expecting me to be honest or open about it, whereas that's my personal space. And I think that would be a really valuable conversation. Good question, Steve. I think that'd be a new area for us to explore with ID, and be really helpful with the hybrid work model and the future of work and future of leadership, to have some insight around how people see personal boundaries. All right, guys, we'll put them in for next time. Have a great rest of your day. We've got a strong contingent today from down south, but we've at least got Judy and Grant, John from the US, not many others on the US. We'll have to tilt that a little bit more next time. But thank you for, Mary too. Thank you for being on the call today, guys. Have a great rest of your day. See you next time.